Hi, it's Michael here, and you may have noticed that our review for Warfare is a little bit late. It's not that we saw Alex Garland's new movie and we decided we just didn't like it. It's just, for me, this is a pretty difficult film to interface with because, at least for me personally, this movie touches rather close to home. It's about the war on terror, something that, coming from a military family, was all too present in my childhood. And, more than that, while Alex Garland, while his movie doesn't necessarily aim to provide its audience with context, that was probably something I struggled with the most in this film because while I don't think it's important to what the movie is trying to achieve, and while I think it does set out to do everything it had intended to in its thesis statement, you'll hear more about that in our review. This movie isn't coming out in a vacuum. The war on terror happened in 2003. We are only 22 years removed from it. And I think I have struggled on how to tell the story of the war on terror and how to break that down for people to understand. This is, of course, if you're listening to the bonus situation, we're going to end up crossing that bridge with our nuclear trilogy episodes. Long story short, the invasion of Iraq, specifically the invasion of Iraq in 2006, where U.S. soldiers are dealing with a rather pissed off insurgency. While watching this movie, I think it's important that you wonder to yourself, well, how did these guys get here? Why are these people bad? Why are these guys shooting at each other, right? And the United States has a pretty long history of fucking around with other countries internationally. And Iraq is so bundled up in the Cold War history that's almost going back to 1953 and the coup that the United States and the United Kingdom successfully executed to overthrow the prime minister of Iran. There are so many little domino blocks that lead from the Shah of Iran, or patsy in Iran, getting overthrown in 1979 to the Iraq-Iran war, where Saddam Hussein goes to war against Iran, and because Iran is at this point a enemy of the U.S. By 1979, that the Shah had been overthrown, and we had only overthrown Mossadegh, the guy before the Shah, because we were afraid that Iran was going to be a communist state. So the Shah, he's our guy. Once he gets overthrown in the Iranian Revolution of 1979, that puts Iran back from being, someone who President Richard Nixon considered an ally, to once again being an enemy of the United States. And during the 1980s, the Reagan administration intervenes in the Iraq-Iran war to supply Saddam Hussein with intelligence, chemical weapon components, and lethal aid. Right, this is a really bloody war. 500,000 people are killed by the end of the war in 1989. And I guess what you just need to know, it's really fucking bad. I guess what's important to know about warfare, we have a Gulf War I, and during this period, especially during the Reagan administration, you have the rise of what we would consider to be, in the United States, the neoconservatives, who are kind of looking at maintaining a America First world police state type deal, where we're basically the King Dick of Shit Mountain. I would again encourage you guys to at least look up a Wikipedia article about this. But by the time we get to 2001, and when George W. Bush is in office, you have a group of people who had initially spearheaded Operation Desert Storm, or the Gulf War I, in 1991. And it goes remarkably well. We do everything short of waltzing into Saddam Hussein's palace and shooting him between the eyes, right? Uh, During this point, the U.S. coalition, which is made up of the U.S., the U.K., Frenchmen, Saudi Arabia, the Australias, Egypt. I'm sorry, the Australians, Egypt, and I mean, fuck it, Chuck Norris. These guys all suffer about 100 casualties, right? Maybe 200 max. Point is, it goes really well, and for a brief minute, for the briefest of minutes, the U.S. gets to have a military victory that the likes of which we really hadn't seen since like World War II. Because again, foreign intervention post World War II, it's all these little guerrilla wars, proxy conflicts. We never really have a decisive victory. And I think that really does inform the psychology of the neoconservatives coming out of the War on Terror in 2001, or excuse me, the 9/11 bombings, which the War on Terror was really a response to. Again, I have just shot a lot of word vomit at you. There's a lot of history and context that goes into warfare. And this movie doesn't really address any of it. The reason why I think this is somewhat concerning is because, quite frankly, I don't think people have the understanding. Like your average Joe has not had enough exposure to the history of these conflicts. And while I don't think Warfare is a movie that will be construed as propaganda or something to be, sought after, like I don't think anyone will watch this movie and head to Army Recruiter afterwards. I just want as much context to be out there as possible. And I want you to keep all of this in mind while you're listening to the review. And without further ado, here you go. Movies on fire. Movies on fire. Man, so every day that goes by, I am conscious of just how many years have passed since 2005. How many years has it been now?
Somehow it's been 20.
It's been 20 goddamn years. I mean, dude, what are some of the things you missed from 2005?
Pop punk music videos.
Okay.
I miss a bunch of young white kids who have never actually seen a bad part of town, desperately trying to convince us that they are, in fact, cool.
I miss going into Spencer's Gifts in the mall and actually being blown away by it and then walking out and being what the hell did I just see,
Yeah. I miss affordable housing. Or at least my parents' affordable housing.
I miss the way Lucky Charms tasted back then.
Oh yeah, that's a win.
Yeah.
I miss Lego commercials on the TV.
Dude, I miss the Lego Star Wars cereals that they released in order to promote those movies.
They had Lego Star Wars cereal?
Yeah, they did.
Oh man.
No, I'm sorry. It wasn't Lego Star Wars cereals. It was just Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith cereal.
Okay, that I believe. Yeah, that I absolutely
believe. It was delicious. it had the little lightsaber in it with the light up spoon. But man, I gotta tell you, the things I don't miss about 2005, Bush, oh boy.
Impending economic collapse.
What a guy. What a guy. The pending economic collapse, the war on terror.
Yes, a different time, a simpler time when we were also at war.
Yay. It was the best.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Indeed. I mean, geez, the Iraq War. Oh, I mean, honestly, I feel like the Star Wars prequel sequel trilogy is really the perfect analogy for the Gulf War, because you have the first Gulf War, which goes over really well
True,
a lot of
true, we
people
loved
get
it.
in on it. We really love it. It goes over perfectly. And then, like, okay, maybe a decade, 2 decades later, we have Gulf War Part 2, and we're just, sorry, it wasn't as fun.
Yeah, Gulf War II, to be fair, is fully over now. We have gotten rid of it finally. And it went great, right? Afghanistan and Iraq are both perfectly free, set up democracies, right? That's what I hear.
Yep. It's perfect. I mean, Iraq certainly doing better than Afghanistan's government is these days. I mean, hey, look, if you're a Taliban bureaucrat, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, that's learning how to use Excel is pretty difficult, and my heart goes out to you. But folks, we are here talking about Warfare, and this is our pretty belated review at this point. We are now living in a post-Minecraft movie world.
True.
We are about to go see Revenge of the Sith tonight. And, I guess it's been about, 2 weeks? A week since we've seen this?
Yeah, we went to see it, I think not last week, the week before. So we've had a little bit of time to digest, kind of understand what we actually think about the movie before. And there's a lot to think about with this one. Just none of those are the themes.
Yeah, because I gotta tell you, I'm not sure what I was expecting walking into this movie. Because, I feel like it's a convention in most war movies you see. Like, when I think about Black Hawk Down, we spend about 30 minutes with the characters in that film, just getting to know everyone and their backstory. And there's the Hans Zimmer score, and there's the drama of it all. And then they finally go into the city of Mogadishu, and you have your war movie. Whereas, how does Warfare begin again?
It's a beautifully edited music video played on a high quality 2006 laptop to a band of cheering soldiers, which feels very real. like absolutely real.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic scene of dudes rock, I think it was a really disarming way to start this movie, but it instantly sold me on the camaraderie that I think these guys had.
It's a great way to remind you as well that these guys aren't like trained soldiers all the time. Like, just seeing them like cheering out to
a booty video.
Yeah.
I mean, they humanized all the characters in this movie immediately by making them just, really, really kind of goofy.
Yeah.
And
it reminds you they're young kids too. That these are like young men, very young men.
Yeah. So, I thought that was probably one of the smartest moves that this movie makes.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, outside of that moment, it is pretty much entirely real time, with one notable exception in the middle of the film. But it's very experiential and very focused on that exact perspective that it draws you into from the start.
Yeah, and for context, this movie chronicles basically a 90-minute segment of the 2006 Battle of Ramadai. I hope to God I'm pronouncing that right. Just, for some viewers' context, I do not have the knowledge to be a subject matter expert on the microscopic scale of the Iraq War.
Yeah, neither of us do.
I can give you some of the historical context that led up to the war. So, I mean, there's a lot of history to go over here.
Yeah, let's just hit the highlights, make sure we get what we need. But
yeah.
there's so much.
Yeah, so, obviously this movie is pretty apolitical. It's just a retelling of this battle, but everything surrounding this movie really, I think this is one of those cases where what people bring into this movie, that is going to be where politics enters this film, because I don't think this movie is really saying anything about warfare one way or another.
No, and I don't think it's interested in saying anything about the Iraq War either. Which is perfectly fine. I think there's an expectation in Hollywood that war movies either need to be glorifying war or anti-war. This doesn't really do either.
Look, if anything, this movie felt like Ray Mendoza's film therapy. for those of you who weren't aware, he was one of the Navy SEALs involved in this battle, who was actually a technical advisor working with Alex Garland on 2024's Civil War. And, I imagined the conversation between the two of them was basically, so, hey, Ray, you want to make a movie? I sure would. That would be really cool. And now it's 2025 and A24 is releasing their second a major war film.
Yeah.
So I guess, that's really, the nuts and bolts of it.
It's focused on this band of soldiers.
Yeah.
That's the extent of the political messaging, is these soldiers had a rough time.
And what's neat about this as well is that they actually shot this on location in Iraq.
Yeah, that helps
where the original battle took place in.
Yeah, which helps give it so much authenticity. You get to see the city streets mapped out fully. Like, you get to see what this would have looked like, which helps a lot with placing you in the world very quickly. You don't really need a lot of introduction to the area itself.
Yeah, and as far as the understanding that I think people are going to bring with them into this movie. This is where I might sound a little bit elitist. I do not think most people have the knowledge of these conflicts and of our history in the last 20 to 30 years to fully understand the context of this film. And that's the part that worries me, is because I think time and time again, whether it's like Starship Troopers or V for Vendetta, we've seen a lot of movies that come out where people will watch it and come away with a very specific interpretation of it that isn't always, authentic to what the movie is trying to portray.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about that as you are. Not because I think it's like solidly anti-war by any means, but because it may accomplish being apolitical enough that there's just nothing to latch on to. It's a weird choice for kind of glorifying a war political perspective, though, as well, because these soldiers don't.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they also don't go conquering, right? Like, they don't really win. So that helps prevent it as well. There's no point where you can be like, wow, like a cathartic release of energy, because there really isn't one. The best they can do is get out alive.
Dude, we walked out of this, honestly, very, very overstimulated. Like, this movie is a bombardment. And, I think I even said this, if I were looking to enlist, I'm not sure this movie would push me towards that. If anything, I feel like it might even push you away.
Yeah, and I do appreciate it has very kind of, it feels like a seesaw pace, but it's very well done in that the beginning of the movie, after the music video, again, it's pretty real time. So it takes a long
basically
time.
Dudes pissing in bottles.
Yeah.
Looking at people on the street. I mean, I think this is smart filmmaking because
it's great, yeah.
It leaves you with this palpable sense of paranoia.
Right. But it's also
builds in.
Boring. Like, it's the old, like, war is an organized bore, right? Like, it gives us tension because we know something's happening because we know they're in a movie, but they don't. And it feels that way. Or like, this is a very routine thing for them to be doing, where it's boring as hell. And that must have been what it feels like to see that sort of conflict spike up, right? It's a very high stimulation experience in the middle of a bunch of really boring time, which sounds like, from speaking with people who've actually been in combat, that's what war really is. That a lot of it is just as boring as it is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I've grown up in a lot of military communities, and you hear a lot of, I think, different recollections of, what it's like to be in these environments. I mean, a deployment is, I feel like most people have a hard time conceptualizing, what it's like to spend 9 months away from everything,
including us, by the way. We've not been deployed, obviously. We're not a subject matter experts on that.
No, I mean, but talking with my dad about some of these things, you get a really weird sense of just otherness, because I've gone through some old family hard drives, and it's very compartmentalized. What time was spent in the family continuum and what was spent outside of that, in some faraway country. It's really bizarre, and I can only imagine just how. I mean, I feel like I'm struggling with my words here to describe this, feeling, but it's a bizarre thing, to go through, and I do feel like this movie just kind of captures just how people would react in that situation.
Yeah, and frankly, they reacted a lot better than I think I would. One of my former roommates actually was in combat in Afghanistan, and he kind of describes it pretty similarly. Of like, it is very chaotic. You're not 100% sure what's going on, but I also didn't press him a lot on that for obvious reasons. But yeah, and he's the one who mentioned consistently, like, it's mostly just boring as hell. Like, there's just a lot of time that's down. So I appreciate that they added that in, which both ratchets up the tension and keeps with that real time piece that I was mentioning, where the time aspect of the movie, in addition to everything else in the movie, is working to keep you sucked into this specific moment, which is incredibly well done. The pacing of the film is, I think, one of the strongest suits.
It's 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And how many 90-minute movies do we see made these days? It doesn't feel like very many.
Yeah, and it knows exactly what it wants to do. It lands exactly that. It doesn't have any fluff either. Like, there's not really a lot that I think you could take out of this movie and make it any better, which I really appreciate. Something that's so tight where there's not any holes. Because I think really, if you remove any scenes from this movie, I think it makes it worse for the most part, which is a great place to be.
Yeah. And again, as for the plot, normally we have a whole humorous interpretation of what's actually happened in the movie, and we'd like to make a lot of jokes. It's just, look, here's the plot of Warfare. Guys go out on patrol, guys get bombed, guys try to get medevaced. The medevac doesn't happen at first. Guys get pinned down a little bit more, reinforcements come, and finally they're allowed to go. And then the last shot of the movie is the Humvees pulling away. Or, excuse me, the Bradleys, the Bradley fighting vehicles. And all the insurgents that they had been fighting just kind of wander out and look around. It's like a weird, palpable sense of relief, because again, this movie is so loud.
Yeah,
and once you get to the ending where the dust finally settles and you can actually take a breath, it's such a weird anticlimactic way to end this movie on.
Yeah, but they also do a great job of establishing, because obviously the insurgents kind of win the battle and that they push the American forces out. And so they're there, but there's also an emphasis on the family whose house the American soldiers took over, right? We see I think it's a group of 4, but don't quote me on that. It's at least 3 of the local Iraqis who just kind of wander through the remains of what used to be their home. And it's extremely quiet, which is even more powerful coming off of the just onslaught of noise that this movie creates. And that's an area, like, can we talk a little bit about the technical side of this movie? Because it's very interesting. I will say, you actually clocked the camera that they used to shoot this, which is incredible.
Yeah, so, man, this is one of those cameras where I really want to, I want to, go to NAB or like Cinecon or hell, I just want to rent one of these for a day. So they shot a lot of this movie using the Ronin 40X. For those of you who saw Civil War, this is actually the same camera system that Alex Garland used in that film. And what's really cool about the Ronin 40, it combines a contemporary cinema camera with, DJI is a Chinese company that is really famous for their gimbals that have basically become industry standard. So it's basically taking these two things and smushing them together. So it's a steady cam that is just incredibly easy to use. And what's so cool about this thing is you can glide the camera around like it's on a track anywhere throughout the film. And it gives you such a sense of immediacy in this film. I'm really interested to see this camera used on more projects, because what it's able to do here is really freaking cool.
Yeah, it plays to one of the film's strengths, which is that oftentimes when you're trying to create kind of a point of view idea, it becomes very shaky, kind of the camera work starts to get weaker because they're trying to put you into places where normally cameras can't go. But the shots here are very steady. It's extremely smooth, it's extremely operated, very stable platforming. And that's, I think, the big advantage this film has, is like, it feels like you're watching this as it's happening right next to you, but it's not doing any of the normal tricks that you get for POV shots. It's mostly just filming what's happening, which in some ways actually brings you more into it than the reverse, because there's no sort of artifice between you. It's weird that it manages to pull in more directly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, again, just the technicals of this movie are just really incredible. I mean, the degree of like immediacy it builds, and the intimacy you see between all the characters. You know, I think one of my favorite parts of Civil War was the cinematography, and I am quite happy to say that this is one department in which Alex Garland does not disappoint. I mean, all of this guy's films look beautiful, and Warfare is no exception to that. Also, again, once the IED goes off, this scene is, I think, really impressive to me, just because you see so much of the light being filtered out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm not sure, if this was CGI or if they just put a bunch of dust in the air, but just the quality and the softness of the light in this scene, it really kind of appealed to me as a I mean, I don't even know where I'm at, if I'm amateur or professional. I mean, I'm about to shoot my first wedding in 2 weeks. Sorry, shameless plug. If you're getting married, give me a call.
Yeah, I will say that adds to another element that is very well done, which is that the amount of information he gives you is kind of exactly what you need to be ratcheting up the tension at any given point, which I think plays to the pacing. So after the IED hits, we see that one of the Iraqi soldiers has been killed, but it takes a bit to note that. And then it slowly kind of ramps up that we see they're still under fire. We see a little bit more of what's happening. We see the Bradley leaving, but it happens again, it's escalating, but it's escalating from a very believable perspective shift as he reveals slightly more information. And then we see that some of the Americans are injured, but we don't quite see the extent to which they're injured. You see that some of the soldiers have recovered, some of them really haven't. Then you start to see that actually the soldiers that are injured are pretty badly injured. One of them at the time could be even dead. He seems to be alive, but just barely. And then it slowly reveals, like, okay, the extent of the injury, the extent that these soldiers are in pain. And the sound is kept muted so that as you're absorbing not completely muted, but muted underneath, so that as you're absorbing the visual component, the sound isn't conveying. And then eventually the sound kicks back in to extend that sort of rise in what your understanding is even further, as it kicks into a soldier just screaming. And that, I think, is very, very well handled, of like, it's giving you the exact amount of information you need at any moment to be consistently escalating tension.
One of the scenes that I thought was really cool is when we're focused in on the actor playing Ray Mendoza in this movie. I believe the man's name is DeFero Wune-Tai. He has a headset on. He's conveying radio signals and communications. And when you're in the theater, you can hear so much radio chatter all over the place. And then he unplugs a cable and it just stops.
But it makes sense in the moment as well, because it's clearly because he's trying to focus on something else, which in this case is helping one of his wounded buddies. And I think the moment that really stood out to me is another moment of sound, but it's where we're consistently seeing that character kind of fade in and out a little bit. And as he's getting too overwhelmed to function, he's kind of shutting down, and that mutes the sound quite a bit. And then he comes back in as things rush back in, and he kind of like, okay, we need to build it. And the sound comes rushing back in. There's a moment where one of the soldiers is screaming. The other one is unconscious, but badly injured as well. And he wakes up while we're still in this muted moment. So the screaming's been completely cut out, but he wakes up and you see him start to scream, knowing that, like, oh man, things just got much worse. But you don't hear it for a bit until we pop back into the moment where the sound starts to cut. So it moves from his perspective into kind of a more omniscient view, and that's when you hear the screaming, but it's still a split second after.
I mean, dude, one of the biggest achievements of this movie is I think you could watch this without the video component. Like, if you were, visually impaired, I still think you would be able to get most of what's going on in this film.
Yeah, and the sound is something else, man. We were mentioning consistently as we were walking out of the theater, the way they make the guns sound is...
They're weighty.
Right.
It sounds like what a gun firing really is. And when you fire a gun, it's a hammer, striking primer that creates a little miniature explosion of gas that propels a small, tiny piece of metal out of a barrel. For those of you who have been to a firing range or who have shot a gun, that is honestly what this movie makes me think of. I mean, it is like, dude, I wish I had brought earplugs to this film.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. It has that kind of low register that for some reason Hollywood just doesn't ever apply to guns. And it keeps the reverberation too. You hear a little bit of the sound bouncing, which is very well done. They also like to shift around in perspective again, where if you're seeing the gun from the muzzle side, so a soldier firing kind of towards you as the camera, it sounds different than it does if you're behind their shoulder and you're hearing them fire from that point, which is true for actual guns as well. Obviously, I've never stood in front of a gun while it's fired, but I've stood to the side versus behind, and they do sound different. That sounds incredible. The way that they do the mechanical sounds of the IFVs as they move around is very, very different, but also very like harsh and clangy, but it's also just hydraulic. It sounds like you would expect hydraulics to sound.
And you had specifically mentioned to me the show of force
Oh
flyovers.
God, yeah. I think there's at least two.
It's
there might
two
be
that
three.
happens in the movie.
Okay, two. So basically what they do for that is they call in the Air Force to fly over, literally show force, like we have air assets in the area, duck, like get out, as an attempt to kind of intimidate. And holy shit, does it work? Because they fly over and it was shaking the theater a little bit.
Yeah, it was.
It's absolutely, it just eclipses everything. And you see the soldiers kind of responding as you're responding as well, where you're like, oh my God. That was really incredible to see, especially the family, the Iraqi family there, like cowering in fear of like, yeah, this would also impact the people who called it in, right? Like it's terrifying, I'm sure, to the people it's intended to, but it's also terrifying to you because it's just this extremely loud noise that's shaking everything around you. Like that, yeah, throw me.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a really good movie, and when I said I'm not necessarily in the mood to watch it again, I think I mean that.
Yeah, and this is an element that I really found interesting is that we saw this in the theater, and I don't think this is a movie I would have liked nearly as much if I were at home.
Certainly not.
Yeah, it kind of plays into the differences of like what the theater experience gives. Because a lot of it today, as we think about it, is kind of you saw like Avengers Endgame in theaters, you got to see Captain America lift the hammer, right? Like the cheers, the positives. But I think there's another aspect to it, which is just focusing on art. There's an old concept for art museums where a lot of the advantage of seeing the art might not even be seeing the art, right? Like you could get a picture of an art piece that you had in a museum and get a very similar effect. But being at the art museum kind of puts you into the right frame of mind to engage with the art, trying to be more open, trying to be more considerate, kind of trying to think of like themes or symbolic elements.
You have fewer distractions. And we are at something of a tipping point for the theater experience. I keep on talking about a Minecraft movie, and I know we've seen a lot of shenanigans, and truth be told, Zach, the reason why we couldn't get IMAX tickets to go see this movie like I originally wanted to was because it had been fully booked out by Minecraft. Well, I'm of two minds about it because I don't want the theater experience to go away.
Right.
I want more room for smaller films like this, but if it is going to take the Minecraft movies of the world to get butts back in seats, well, then I think I'm for it.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that's not new either. There's always been movies like the Minecraft movie.
No, certainly not. But 2025 has been a really odd year for new releases. And this is where I think we might change subjects a little bit. But, Black Bag, Steven Soderbergh. It stars... Who was Magneto in X-Men again?
Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett. They play spies who are in this horrible, weird relationship. They're so creepy in this movie, but they're horrible people and they love each other. If that doesn't make you want to go see Black Bag, I don't know what will. Point is, I feel like if it was even 2011... Black Bag would have been in the black. It would have cleared its budget and then some. But, dude, it's already out on Amazon. It's getting harder and harder for smaller movies. I think, one-off films that aren't based on previously established IP, to have that successful theater run. We're not seeing films with legs like they used to have.
No. And I am worried as well about what it's doing for movies like Warfare, where, again, this is not like a comfortable movie. I did not walk out of it enjoyed. I walked out of it like overwhelmed. I didn't want to see anything else or do anything else for a little bit. And that's a very strange experience. Again, it's an artistic one, right? Where when I'm watching at home, I often don't want movies that are as artistic unless I'm in the mood for it. But how many people are even looking for that anymore? Because if you're not somebody who like already loves cinema, I think there's less of an incentive to do that at home. Less of an incentive to kind of try and manufacture that experience for yourself. So I worry what it's doing to these more artistic movies, which it feels strange to call Warfare like that, but this isn't designed to just make you feel good or be a blockbuster, really.
Well, dude, again, I think I was trying to make the comparison. Oh, that's ironic. I looked up Warfare budget, and I have the U.S. Department of Defense budget.
I'm sure it's the same as
which
Warfare,
is
though, movies, right?
$895.2 billion.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what we spent on this movie. That feels right. You can see it on screen. Those fighter jets, they look so real.
Yeah, but Warfare cost about $15 million to make.
It's actually impressive. I would expect it a little bit more.
According to, what? Hang on. Let me get. Okay, all right. So, $20 million. This movie was modestly marketed.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know what, Zach? Let's just say this cost between 20 to 30 million to make. I feel like that's a pretty fair estimate. Yeah, this movie has only made 19.2 million.
Ooh, that's not good.
Now, that being said, I don't think the mark of a good movie is whether or not it makes money. And the difference between Warfare, right, and war movies that have been more successful, think back to American Sniper, which is the Clint Eastwood, Bradley Cooper movie about Chris Kyle, right?
Which I actually liked. I thought it was a good movie.
I have my qualms with it, but
As do I, yeah. But
I think that movie embraces more established tropes that might tend to attract, audience members.
it's more narrative for sure.
I feel like it's a bit more palatable, even when it's trying to be, quote unquote, gritty and realistic. It's presenting that content in a way that I feel like audiences have become accustomed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much more accessible.
And I don't think it is as upsetting of a movie as Warfare is.
Not even
because,
close.
again, this movie goes to, deliberate lengths to attack its audiences, right? Because if you were someone who has epilepsy or something like that, or if you're really sensitive to loud noises, you're not going to enjoy this.
No, you're really not. And that's maybe another thing to mention for at home, because even obviously if you don't have a big screen and a good sound system, you're not going to get the full effect of the theater experience. But pretty much everybody knows that, right? The difference here is I think it is that quiet kind of sitting in the experience completely, because you're completely surrounded by it. In this case, in the sound, as well as just the experience itself. But it's something that you can really sink into, which for these more experiential movies that don't have as much of a traditional narrative, that aren't as focused on plot, there isn't much to latch onto at a home viewing. And I think that's going to be a difficulty, is this movie is honestly hard to discuss in a lot of ways, because we're not really talking about the structure of the film or the plot or anything that you can share easily on a marketable tweet either, because there really isn't any of that. It's all about that experience. And if that experience isn't in the theater, it's completely changed in a film that isn't as built on a structure.
Yeah, and again, this is why I want to continue to see movies like this in the theater, because this was a really unique experience. This was something that, I like when I'm thinking about the movies I've seen this past year come, December. Yeah, this is going to come up.
Yeah, this stands out in a really good way. Despite the fact that when I walked out of that theater, I did not want to go back in and watch it again. No chance. But yeah, that's sometimes worth it. And that something that's that off-putting, it's about combat, it kind of maybe should be a bit off-putting. And I think that the fact that it is so overwhelming probably indicates that it nailed the presentation it was going for, which is, again, a very good thing. I think that it's an artistic statement to say that it does make you want to not watch it at home. But again, what does that do to the movie's tale?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a producer on this movie, I mean, I'm obviously proud of what I've done, but I don't think that this is going to make the money that perhaps some folks were expecting it to.
Yeah, I doubt this is going to be a big streamer. Maybe I can see it doing okay on home video if it's like DVD and Blu-ray, because I feel like people who are movie nerds enough to be buying Blu-rays probably will like this movie.
I mean, let me ask you a question. Do you think this is going to generate like a cult following? Like, do you think people, who are streaming at home, who have Max or Netflix or whatever? I mean, this is an A24 movie, so it's going to go to HBO first.
Right.
Do you think this will find a second life on the streaming services?
That's hard to say. Obviously, it's difficult to tell because cult classics are always unpredictable. But I feel like cult classics, in a lot of ways, there's really two kind of ways that you generate them. One is that they were movies that were a little bit ahead of their time, but they're mostly watched by like younger people, either like teens or below, who then come to appreciate the movie over time. Something like Speed Racer or something like that. The Wachowski one, not the anime. Or they have an interesting hook, like something that's very unique that can be shared around kind of socially. And I don't really know if this I definitely don't think this is a movie that a lot of kids are going to come out of loving, for sure. So I don't think it's going to take that route. And I'm also not sure this has enough of a unique hook to really sell. Like, again, trying to convey to people what the advantages of this movie are very difficult, because you can't say like, oh, it had a really good twist, or like there was a really cool plot point, or even like, yeah, it was just really cool. Like it's none of those things. It's very much just like, yeah, this movie was so overwhelming, it made me want to sit in silence for 2 hours. Like, I guess it's a hook, but it's not really a selling point.
I can definitely imagine myself as maybe not an intro to film class, but you're taking a class about movies about our armed forces and how they're depicted. This is obviously going to play, right?
Oh yeah, that I can absolutely see. I do think this has a role eventually in film classes, for sure. But I'm not sure that's enough to like generate a cult following.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I don't have much else to say about this movie.
Yeah, which is kind of what we were just getting at, is it's very hard to talk about, because it's hard to talk about in a very good way, in that it nails what it's going for, so there's no real flaws for us to poke at, but it does it in such a simple way that it's hard to praise for a long period of time.
For those who aren't present here with me right now, I have constructed an entire timeline of the events that precipitated the Second Gulf War. And that is honestly the only way in which I can put this movie into context. I feel like if you watch Full Metal Jacket, right? That's obviously a piece of fiction. So,
right.
From the start, it's different. But you can watch Full Metal Jacket and you can pull a lot out of it. There are specific characters in that movie. Now, I'm not necessarily going to say no one here is doing a poor job acting. I mean, Will Poulter is in this. Yeah. He's playing one of the SEALs.
He's always incredible.
And he does a wonderful job. Yeah, I mean, Michael Gandolfini is in this movie. Joseph Quinn is killing it. The kid who I mentioned earlier, Kai Farrow, I want to say is his name. Excellent job. It's just, this is a reenactment. I go back to my original statement, and this is one of the reasons why I think this movie is so cool. It's almost like, this is Ray Mendoza's therapy for, processing some of these experiences, is getting to basically go back in time and do it all over again.
Yeah. And I do suspect that, or at least I hope, that Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza came out of this thinking they did what they set out to do. Because I think they did. If the idea of this was to convey to me what the soldiers experienced on the ground, obviously it wasn't an actual physical pain, which is a positive, but like, they did it. They communicated to me at least a tenth of what it's like to be in combat. And I think that's a success. Whether that this will make money is a different question.
Whereas Civil War, I feel like, is trying to tackle a lot of topics.
Too many topics, frankly.
and maybe not delivering on its intentions. Warfare's thesis statement is, here's 90 minutes from this man's life.
Yeah.
And it delivers.
Yeah. Yeah, it knows exactly what it wants to do. It does exactly that. And then it gets out of the theater. It leaves you. And to be fair, I think a 2-hour version of this movie also would have been too overwhelming. Like, I would have started to get. Like, I might have needed to leave eventually.
Well,
So yeah, this I think perfectly nails that short, sweet. Well, sweet is strong.
yeah, I mean,
Short, punchy.
again, I would like to go back to my Black Hawk Down comparison. They could have had an extra 15, 20, 30 minutes of these guys after they've watched the Booty music video.
Right.
And we get to know everyone. In fact, really, I was thinking about this walking out of the film. The biggest comparison I can draw from Warfare is to the Gaspar Noé film Climax, which is a lovely little movie about a group of
very loving
ballerina
movie.
dancers in France, of all places, who enjoy a bowl of sangria that has been heavily spiked with LSD.
Yeah, it is Gaspar Noé.
And they lose their fucking minds, you know? And even that movie, it's like, hey, you're going to get to know these characters for 30 minutes at a party. You're just a fly on the wall. And then people start tripping balls. And I think, if you're trying to induce a panic attack, I think both of these movies would make a lovely double feature.
Yeah, I could add Nose Enter the Void as well, which is a lot of the same kind of experiential concepts. And also like very quick moving through characters you don't necessarily know, but get placed into the perspective of. That's a great comparison, actually. This is really, it's just about that. This isn't about the Iraq War so much as it is about these soldiers' experience in it. And yeah, like I said, it's just a very hard movie to discover anything to talk about. It's too simply good.
Yeah. Among the criticisms I've heard directed towards Warfare is the assertion that we don't have enough to do with the Iraqi family. And this is a criticism I think I both agree and disagree with because, again, going back to what you were saying, Zach, this is a 90-minute movie. I don't know how else you could include these people. Mm-hmm. I think what people are criticizing is a lack of perspective that's being explored in contemporary war on terror cinema. We don't have a movie that takes place from the perspective of someone who was swept up in the Iraqi insurgency, right?
Right.
We don't have the letters from Iwo Jima to to the flags of our fathers, with these films. And that is a valid criticism, not necessarily of this movie, but of just where we're at covering films along these lines. I mean, hell, I don't even think we have many movies depicting the Vietnam War where we get to explore that conflict from the perspective of the Vietnamese. And personally, I think I would welcome a movie like that.
I think it would be interesting, and this is a weird place for me to be in that I don't disagree with that criticism. I do to a little bit of an extent because I do think they present those characters in the form of that Iraqi family fairly well. Because it's worth noting they don't actually get that much less screen time than a lot of the soldiers, and we consistently see them being terrified of the soldiers. They're trying to do their own thing. We see the horror that's written on their house. We see them getting angry about the fact that these soldiers blew up their house.
I mean,
so it's not like they're non-presences. However, I also think that it's worth remembering that perspective is inherently limited. If you see everybody's perspective as equal in one of these contexts, you do lose the specificity. Since this is Ray Mendoza's story, ultimately, and the story of him and his buddies, I think it makes sense that we don't see the Iraqis except in the way that those soldiers did, right? Where we can't understand their language, except through a translator who also is somewhat removed from us. We kind of see what we're doing to them, but we don't really see much of what happens after. And that makes sense because it helps put us even more further into the stories of these soldiers, where imagine let's say if we got a 3 or 4 minute scene or even just scattered throughout the movie where the Iraqi family talks to the soldiers through the translator, maybe about what the soldiers going into their house has done to their lives. It would give them more perspective. I'm not sure it would make the movie better.
But it would stop the movie for 5 minutes.
Right. And it would actually...
It would kill the pacing. And it would probably... I don't think it would be consistent with the reality of
Yeah.
of what's happened here, and that's
And
why.
yeah, I think that's the weakest part is it would pull you out of those soldiers' perspective because it doesn't feel real. Because what Iraqi soldier or what Iraqi civilian, sorry, is going to come up to a man with an enormous gun and be like, "You need to get out of my house," when they know what's happening? Like you wouldn't do that in that situation.
Oh God, no.
I wouldn't. And I think it's more realistic that this family just spends the entire time terrified because that's probably what they would have done.
Yeah, and again, that this is not a criticism I can hold against the movie.
No, yeah.
But wider, I can definitely empathize with
Yeah.
what people are saying here.
Yeah,
I mean,
that I
it
agree.
would be interesting to get that movie. Just
Right.
I think before going into this, know that is and is not what you're getting here.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, I would love to see a movie like that that examines the Iraqi perspective on the war. I'm not sure it should be this movie, because this is too focused on the soldiers.
Yeah.
But I would love to see that movie. If you could do a very similar thing to Warfare, but focusing entirely on the Iraqi perspective, that could be very, very compelling. Maybe a little too real, honestly.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I have nothing else to say about Warfare. I enjoyed it. I probably will not watch it again.
Yeah, we've gotten a quick. We figured out what we wanted to do. We did exactly that. Now we're getting out.
If they remade it with the fine performers from the music video "Call on Me," featuring the music of Eric Prides, I would be interested in seeing that special edition.
I think that they should keep the same clothing that they have in the music video, but use the guns with the realistic sounds that they have in the movie.
Oh man, instant classic. Okay, well, folks, we will be coming at you pretty soon with our review of Revenge of the Sith, and I think it's appropriate that we have covered and discussed Warfare because Revenge of the Sith is released in 2005, and that is also very much a movie of its time.
Yeah, in so many ways.
All right, folks, we'll see you next time.
Movies on fire. Movies on fire.